both are feeling pretty rough this morning. I don't think I've ever been in so much pain after a bike race without crashing or anything untoward happening. Just like hands numb, feet numb, still.
I have chafing on my butt cheeks.
The chafing, yeah, what I learned this weekend is I have never had chafing before. What I thought was chafing was just cute little redness.
Light rubbing.
Yeah. Anyway, TMI. But we think we have it bad. It's raining. There are still people out on course. I don't know how long it's been raining. But we've decided we would get up and drive over and watch the finish. The cutoff is at 8:30. What we do is hard. It's hard to go fast. It really is. But it's way harder to be out on your bike for 25 hours. So huge kudos to anyone who was out there for 20 plus hours and in the rain. That is brutal.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We did it. It was a pretty good weekend for us. It's been 2 weeks now. We were finally feeling human again. So we wanted to sit down, talk about what we did well, what we didn't do as well, what we think people should know if they're attempting Marji.
Immediately after Marji, we drove to Sid's aunt and uncle's house in Wisconsin. It is on a beautiful lake. It was the perfect way to recover because we basically just spent 2 days flopping in the water, getting back out and drying off, and flopping back in the water. It was really, really nice and a good mental and physical reset.
I think we both knew the recovery from this was going to be hard. We knew that going in. I will say it hit me like a ton of bricks the moment I finished the race. I actually felt remarkably good for most of the race. I mean, obviously there was pain, which we'll talk about more later. Pretty much finished and just felt like I was getting run over by a truck. Barely slept that night. There was just this constant barrage of red arrows coming at me.
I, on the other hand, was seeing my front wheel going back and forth like this between trees. That is a new one for me. I've never tried to go to sleep and felt like I was still riding.
And part of that I think is finishing later than average for a race. Part of that was just, it was a mentally intense race. You were always looking for arrows, you were always trying to figure out where you're going, and it just went on for a really long time. I actually feel like we both recovered pretty well from this. We gave ourselves a couple days at the lake, and then we had a couple days driving home to New Mexico. I feel like my legs came around much quicker than my butt or my mind. Definitely needed a few weeks to sort of mentally reset and want to ride a bike again. What we wanted to do in today's video is go through what we think went well, what we would do differently if we were to do this again, and what didn't go as well. And we're going to divide that into a couple categories. We've got just physical preparedness, fueling and hydration, gear choice, and mental preparedness. So those are going to be our categories. Before we continue our postmortem analysis of the Marji Gesick, I'm going to pop in here with a very exciting announcement, and that is we are opening kit sales of these jerseys that we designed along with Primal and Low Send Quest for our trip to Tanzania earlier this year. We got so many questions about if you could buy one of these jerseys then that we decided to work with Primal and put together what is essentially a flash sale. So this weekend and through this coming Tuesday, you can get these jerseys. We have XC jerseys, bibs, and more trail style short sleeve jerseys. These are probably my favorite jersey that we've ever designed. They are so fun. They are so flashy. They are available via the link in the pinned comment or with this QR code. Do not wait. We are not kidding. The sale really is only open until Tuesday. Obviously both had very successful weekends. Did pretty fast Marji Gesick times for being #fresh meat. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how we were able to do that And a lot of that falls into this physical preparedness category. Part of it is like we were just coming into this year with a really good base.
And coming into this event with a really good base. Like this was, as you guys know, not our first event of the year.
No.
At all. We've done a lot of races this year. We've done a variety of races, everything from like some shorter events to stage races to 6 hours. Sid did a 12-hour solo. So like we've done
Mega Avalanche.
long, yeah, but that was more on the short side.
I know, I just think Mackie
Yeah.
is probably the first ever to do the Mega Avalanche Marji
Probably true.
duo. I'm curious if anyone is
Yeah.
attempting that for 2025. Please let us know in the comments.
More miles this year than we've ever done in the past, or more hours on the bike than we've ever done in the past. And we've done a lot of longer events, 50 milers, 6 hours, 12 hours. And I think all of those combined, on top of the fact that we have been racing bikes for a very long time, allowed us to sort of have the success that we did.
The reason we bring this up is we know people who have signed up for Marji 2025 are probably watching this video, and you may not be able to do the training load that we did for this. We did a handful of weeks where we were riding the bike in that 16 to 20 hour range. That was obviously very beneficial and definitely part of our success at Marji. That said, if you are signed up for the Marji 100 and you do not have years and years of training under your belt, like you probably aren't going to do that kind of volume without risking injury or burnout.
We want to talk about sort of what we did with the hope that you can sort of take aspects of it that make sense for you and apply those to your training so that you can have a successful Marji.
So one piece of it definitely was higher volume. Being on the bike for 11 to 13 hours is a lot of time, and the more volume you have under your belt, the more comfortable you will be with that. That said, I think that isn't the only piece. Obviously, for an XC race, Marji's definitely on the technical side of things. And so part of that with the more technical mountain biking is it's not just the skills. The skills are obviously a piece of that and something we've worked on over the years, but it's also the fatigue factor with rough trail, rocks,
Lots of up, down,
punchy hills.
which is something that living in Los Alamos, we actually have a lot of. You know, we do have the big long climbs that you get out west. We can go climb for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but we also have a lot of shorter, punchy stuff like you get at Marji Gesick. And so that was really helpful to be used to that. Oh, this trail, you know, if you look at it on a map, an elevation profile, it either looks flat or it looks like this, and you're like, oh, not a big deal. And then you actually go ride it and you realize that actually it's really hard because it's very steep up, very steep down, but for very short periods of time. And, you know, regardless of where you live, maybe you have that, maybe you don't, but just spending time like purposefully looking for trails that have shorter climbs and shorter descents, getting used to what that feels like, as well as just spending lots of time on your mountain bike. Well, we did more volume on our gravel bikes, but we also made sure to spend plenty of time on the mountain bikes because you get a lot of fitness benefits from like the longer, sort of easier miles of a gravel or road bike, but nothing replicates mountain biking like mountain biking.
Also, you're building all those small muscles, that stabilization, all those, I guess, resilience to like bumps and vibration over time that you are really going to be hurting in a race like Marji Gesick if you have not done long miles on your mountain bike going into it. Preferably long miles on rough, rocky terrain. And that's, I think, something that we did kind of accidentally in that we like mountain biking, so we do, when the trails are dry, we do most of our hours on mountain bikes when we can. Another piece, and this goes for all mountain biking, but the more technical, the more punchy, the more it's true, and that is gym work. You know, this year we kind of did our usual gym sort of progression, whereas we did much heavier stuff in the off season and then lighter kind of maintenance gym work throughout the season. I think we did a good job of not dropping the ball on the gym work like we have sometimes in like July, August when we're doing so much riding. The other piece is after I did the 12-hour Enchanted Forest, I had a ton of pain in my stabilizer muscles, and that's hard to describe, but it was like my core and like my ribs hurt to the touch after that. I reached out to Dane, who's the PT and strength coach we work with, and I was basically like, can we do anything to help with that? And we sort of shifted things around, did a lot of one-arm carries because you're stabilizing with the other side, or like same overhead carries as well. And I think that made a difference because I did not really have that with Marji at all. Like I didn't have that like rib pain and like core pain especially not during the race. Everything did hurt after the race, but who cares? At that point, you're done.
There's a fair amount of hike-a-bike during the Marji Gesick.
Oh, we're walking more.
Things are just really steep, and especially the last 40 miles when you're in the Ramba trails, they're steep and you're tired because you've been riding for 60 miles.
Yeah, everybody is going to push their bike a little bit during Marji. I think we came into this with this aspect way more dialed than most people, just because I would say this year especially, we have done a lot of hiking with our bikes. The race that we did in Africa, there was so much hike-a-bike in that, and they were pretty extended hike-a-bikes and extended bike on back, walking up ledges kind of hike-a-bikes.
Yep.
And then obviously Breck Epic, the wheeler day, I mean, you are pushing for like 20, 30 minutes at high elevation.
Multiple times.
To me, compared to both of those races, there was not that much hike-a-bike in Marji, especially considering how long it was. And I think part of that though is because I was able to ride a lot that many people were not riding.
I think the other aspect is it was very broken up. Whereas Breck Epic, it was, like Sid said, 20, 30 minutes, continuous hiking. Africa, there were long stretches of continuous hiking. Marji was like, get off your bike, run up a little thing, 30 seconds, get back on your bike.
Optimistic.
But like you'd go up a little thing and it'd take you 30 seconds and then you'd be back on your bike and you go down, you know, so you'd have to do lots of short hiking with your bike as opposed to any long, which in a lot of ways is way harder, actually.
I thought it was easier. The getting on and off was harder. I would say that is something worth practicing if you're going to do this race, is your mounting, dismounting, especially when tired or gassed, because if you're good at getting on and off your bike, you will be able to ride more. And I think we were passing people who were doing the 50 mile, and we saw a lot of people who were kind of just walking all the in-between spaces, in between the technical things, just because I think it was hard for them to get back on and get going again. I would have to walk up something, but then I'm pretty good at getting on even at the top of something steep and kind of nasty, and like getting clipped in and starting in the middle of that, which saves you a lot of time if you're not also walking down the things.
Yeah. What did not go as well physically?
I mean, I honestly feel like I was as prepared as I could be given what I had to work with going into this.
Yeah, no, you basically, Sid basically killed it. Overall, I did not feel as prepared for this event as Sid did. Like, I think I had some other goals this year, like Meg Avalanche, which I really enjoyed, but Meg Avalanche is a 40-minute downhill, which does not really translate to riding your bike for 100 miles in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so, like, I also did a lot of, 50 milers, Breck Epic, stage races. I did those things also, but part of it is that those days are shorter for me. Like the 50 miler that we did was an hour faster for me than it was for you.
Yeah.
So like, that's just an hour less riding.
Well, in Breck Epic, for me, between warm-ups, cool-downs, and racing, I had a 22-hour week that week, which is a solid week, and I don't think you were anywhere close to that.
I think mine was like 16 or 17.
Yeah, and the week you were in France, I did like a 17-hour week.
Yep.
The week you raced at Purgatory, I think was like a 15-hour week. And then the week you were skiing in January, I did like an 18-hour week that week. So like you missed some volume moments, and you didn't do the 12-hour.
And I didn't do the 12-hour, which I was totally happy to have not done.
It was pretty terrible, I'm not gonna lie. That was a rough day. I had a much harder day there than I did at Marji Gesick. And even though it is objectively was an easier day.
But I wonder if that aspect of having raced for over 10 hours and over 100 miles earlier this year made Marji just not feel as terrible.
I think it did.
Yeah. Because my longest race of the year before Marji was the 6-hour at Galisteo.
Oh, yeah.
I might have done a 6-hour ride. I can't remember if I had one of those.
Well, you and I rode to Taos.
Oh yeah, so that was about 6
hours. And then I did the ride with Bo. I can't even remember how long that took us, but it was like 8 to 9.
So that was like
so
another
you had
big.
quite a few more 6+ hour
Yeah.
rides than I did.
I will say the 12-hour after that, I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna ride for another 3 hours. Like, I think
Yeah.
it made me a lot more nervous mentally because I had such a bad day. So I think like the sort of cautionary tale there is if you do a test event or you do something like this to prepare and you feel terrible, I feel terrible. That does not mean you're gonna feel terrible at Marji. Part of it, like you said, was the fact that I had done that. I think the other part is that this was just a very mentally stimulating course. There were a ton of people out there supporting. It was not a lap race. There was no like repetitive factor. Didn't really know where I was going, didn't really know what was coming. Always looking for arrows, and I was like passing people that were in the 50-mile race, and there was just like a lot going on that it just felt more, it was easier to be positive, I think, for me.
This is something that I have kind of since realized I think I didn't do very well, or as well as I could have. I think I honestly just didn't eat enough. Based on what I did consume, which was a lot of scratch high carb, some gels, some sandwiches, and a variety of bars and chews, I think I ended up with a little bit under 6,000 calories consumed. The measured calorie burn from my power meter was 8,500 calories burned. So that's like 2/3 or so, but doesn't take into consideration base metabolic rate, which is just what your body burns being alive, or the fact that power meters don't measure any of the upper body and rest of your body work that you have to do riding a mountain bike. I suspect between base metabolic rate, the 8,500 calories that my power meter registered, and the additional ones, the probably total calorie burn for the day was 12 or 13,000 calories, and I simply don't think that was enough.
What we've learned a little bit from this is I seem to do much better in a calorie deficit than you do, because I was also, let's look at the math. I calculated it out. My goal was to eat, I think, around 5,000 calories. A lot of that was coming from these sticky rice cakes from the Scratch Portables cookbook. Someone had given me some of these during Breck Epic, and they just like absolutely hit the spot. It was like the only thing I could eat. So I was like, I'm gonna make these for Marji. It's gonna be great. And I just couldn't do it. Like, I could not eat them. They were hard to get out of the package. They were falling apart. So I ended up just scrapping that entirely, not eating any of that, which again, this is just the classic, like, you're not supposed to try new things on race day, and this is why. On the other side of that though, I did a really good job eating everything else and drinking a ton of fluid and getting immense amount of sodium into me through various sources. And I ended up at about 4,040 calories, at least that's our calculation, which is not perfect, but probably pretty close. And according to my power meter, a calorie burn of 7,400. I think we can safely add 1,000 for upper body work. And so still discounting BMR, we're under 50% calories for the whole day, which is not great.
But you felt surprisingly good, whereas I felt terrible.
I felt surprisingly good. I had like the one moment where I think I got behind and got that kind of dizzy chills sort of feeling. Pound a ton of fluid and a gel and like felt better. However, I do just like looking at these numbers, I'm like, I think there's room for improvement for sure. I would say things that worked were the meat sticks for me. Apparently I love meat sticks and could just chow down on a meat stick in the middle of the race.
All right.
The Never Second gels were great. The high carb was great. I think it was good that we had like a variety of different things as opposed to like just gels. Because I got through 2 bars, 2 packs of chews, 4 gels. I had 5, I lost one in my pocket. And that's like something I'm slightly sad about because I really wanted it, and I like pulled out a wrapper and was like, oh, I guess I ate this already, and I'm like delusional at hour 12, you know. I could have really used that. 808 grams of carbs, 47 grams of protein, and 65 grams of fat. I think the protein and fat from the meat sticks did just like help me feel better, even if I wasn't necessarily using that as fuel at the intensities that I was going, like having something for satiety. Like for you, that was sandwiches with turkey. For me, that was the meat sticks. Overall, like I felt really good. I feel like it was a success. And then I look at the numbers and I'm like, okay, 60 grams of carbs an hour, which I know I can handle more than that. Have done a lot more than that in the past. So definitely food for thought going forward. Get it?
Food for thought.
Fluid-wise, I did such a good job. That's the first time in my life I have ever drank 2 full packs in a day.
And 8 short
And
bottles.
8 bottles for a total of 8.7 liters.
Yeah.
And in case you're curious, neither of us peed during this race.
Based on like fluid loss that we've calculated, Sid would have lost 7.3 liters and consumed 8.7. Like she was saying, you can probably assume that that rate that we had calculated was low because it was at lower humidity, lower temperature. If we increase mine a little bit also, my total fluid loss was probably somewhere in the like 12 liter range, and I drank 9 liters. The recommendation from our dietitian is 60 to 90% of fluid loss. So that does put me smack dab in the middle of that range, but I kind of think I could have consumed more, and I probably would have felt better if I had consumed more. I think just in general, I don't think I fueled and hydrated as well as I could have.
So gear choices, I would say overall super happy with our setup for this race. The RE Signal Peak was an awesome Marji Gesick bike with 115 in the back, 120 in the front.
Pedals
Light.
well, descends well.
Right.
We've just been so happy with those bikes this year.
And there was absolutely nothing on this course that I didn't feel confident riding on that bike in the dark while tired, which I think says a lot. Obviously, there were some hills I didn't get up, but that's on me.
Yeah.
In terms of changes that I made specifically for this race, super happy to have a 30-tooth chainring on. There is nowhere on this course where I was spun out with a 32 tooth, because the only like fast section is on the pavement between Marquette and, apparently I pronounced this wrong, how do you Nagani. And that's mostly uphill, so like you're really not going to be spun out even with a 30 tooth. What I gained from that was like probably a handful of hills that I wouldn't have made it up otherwise, which like makes a big difference. I ran the Expedo Baldwin pedals because I had such bad foot pain at the Enchanted Forest race. And that did seem to make a difference. Like I didn't notice foot pain until 95 or so, and then it was like pretty bearable. Full disclosure, my feet were numb for 2 days after this race though, but at least it didn't bother me during the race.
For me, it was my fingers.
Yeah.
Like my pinky finger felt really weird on both hands for like 2 or 3 days after.
I ran different shoes, XC7s instead of the XC9. They're slightly more forgiving, not as stiff.
I decided to run an Aspen ST tire on the back. The Aspen ST is ridiculously fast rolling, semi-slick, and you guys know we love the Aspen. That's what we raced at most races this year. Don't need the additional traction of the Aspen versus the Aspen ST. They make the Aspen ST in a 120 casing, which is the same as the Aspen. It has the same puncture protection, etc. And so I was just like, I'm going for the Aspen ST on the back.
Fast rolling tires make a difference over 109 miles. The race casing 170 TPI is probably pushing it a little bit. Like there's enough rocky stuff, and like you also are at a higher danger of taking bad lines by mile 100. I think a pack is an essential for this race. I think there were some guys out there without packs, but
You'd have to commit to either stopping at a lot of aid stations, because there were plenty of aid stations out there.
Yeah,
you
you
could have
could
gone
fill up.
from place to place. That's a lot of time wasted, in my opinion, or used stopping at every aid station and filling up a bottle.
I mean, I think drinking that much was probably part of why I felt as good as I did, because I clearly was a bit low on calories for what would maybe be optimum, but I felt pretty good most of the time, and I think that was probably due to hydration. I was pretty pleased with our little Marji Gesick specific token pouches.
Yeah, those worked really well. The reason I wanted something that was not in my pocket is because I knew that I was going to be getting in and out of the pockets,
that's
like
the thing.
food, potentially tools, etc., etc. And I wanted something that was like, I'm never gonna touch this unless I'm putting tokens in it. Lights and clear glasses.
I mean, the outbound lights are amazing.
I didn't have any night riding, so I didn't even use the lights.
I had way more light than I needed, to be honest, because it never got fully dark on me, and still see the sun setting when I was on the pavement. At the end, I needed the lights because it was dark enough in the woods that you couldn't see where you were going, but I probably did not need the like 50 billion lumens that you get with that. Like, I felt like I was like a semi-truck. Like, everybody else has these like little lights on. I'm like, it was great because I knew I was close enough to the end that I just ran them on full blast.
Yeah. And then clear glasses. I was never riding in the dark. I never needed lights. But at the last aid station, I swapped to clear glasses, and I'm very glad I did that because it's just getting dark enough that makes a difference.
And we both ran pink rose glasses for the whole day. We didn't run dark glasses at all. The other gear piece, we already kind of talked about this a bit, would be the anti-chafing things. We obviously didn't do a great job with this. We put chamois butter on at the beginning. I mean, I really could have used a re-up, but I realistically am never gonna stop in a race to put more chamois cream on, no matter how dire things are getting, and this was dire.
If I were to do this again, I would chamois cream like usual, and then I'd put a thicker, stickier chamois cream, which Squirt Lube makes one called Barrier Balm. But I think I would use that like higher up on my butt cheeks because that's where I ended up chafing quite a bit. And it was really not that comfortable.
With a 100-mile race, there's always just gonna be stuff that's gonna not feel good. And a lot of that is how you deal with that mentally, which is a perfect segue to our final category.
The mental category.
Mental preparedness. I think we both did a pretty good job of setting realistic expectations, preparing ourselves to be in pain and push through anyway.
Cramp and push through anyway. Get tired and push through anyway.
Yeah. I felt very positive through the whole race. I think to me it was like just getting to do this race sort of felt like a victory. I definitely was nervous going into it. The morning of, I was kind of able to like release some of that pressure, remember that I do know how to do this and go out and do it. Once the race started, I felt a lot better than I did beforehand. In terms of things I could have done better mentally, I feel like I need to work a little bit on my self-trust with things, specifically navigational things. The token thing, I just had a lot of doubt of like, did I miss a thing? I'm so confused. Did I miss a turn? Did I miss a token? Definitely a couple times like kind of slowed down because I was so convinced I was off course.
We haven't picked up any real tokens yet, right?
Cool. It's frustrating to rewatch some of the footage and be like, what are you doing? Why are you waiting for this guy to catch up so you can ask him about tokens? Like, you had all your tokens.
Part of that was we'd never raced Marji before. But the truth is the course is extremely well marked, incredibly well marked. And you should run a GPS, which we both did, that has the route on it. So between those two things, it's possible to get lost, but if you're paying attention and you have your GPS loaded, you'll probably notice pretty quick. And then the other part is the tokens. There's a checkpoint sign ahead of time that is very obvious. And then there is the pumpkin, which is and they're not like off in the woods, they are on the trail. It's hard to
I mean, I
miss.
think so many people had just kind of told me like, oh, Todd likes to mess with everybody. And I guess I'm just a very creative person because by the second pumpkin, I was like, there's these random words in here. Like, clearly we're supposed to memorize this and there aren't gonna be any tokens. We're just gonna have to recite a limerick at the end. And I've already missed the words that were in the first. So like people are passing me, I'm like, were there any tokens? Like, do you remember what it said? And they're all like, what is wrong with you? There were no tokens. That would be a bad way of doing it because you could just ask somebody in the last 3 miles, like what it was, you know, and you could like share information. So I don't think they're gonna do that.
If somebody was standing next to a pumpkin and I was like, is there a token? And they said, nope.
I looked in every pumpkin. I had a bit of a crisis of confidence going into this race, and I think it was partially just this mismatch between the information that we were getting from people. This race is really hard, it's gonna take you 20 hours, like da-da-da, you're gonna be out there forever. And also knowing Britt, who I raced with at Breck Epic, did it in like 12:40. And I was like, how can these things be true? Like, how could I?
How can it take me 20 hours and just under 13
like, you know,
hours?
I was like, I know I'm like around Britt's speed. And I think Mackie kind of had to sit me down and be like, look, I don't know if you would beat Britt on this course, but like, she's not gonna put an hour into you over every segment. Like, that's just not going to happen with similar conditions.
I had to talk Sid down a couple times, but once you got into the race, besides the like questioning if you were lost, tokens, blah, blah, stayed positive and focused, that was not as true for me. I don't know if it was the fewer hours that I had overall on the bike or just had different physiology where like I tend to be better at short stuff, or it was not fueling properly, or some combo of all of them.
I'm struggling, guys. I think we can safely say I am not having fun anymore.
Mentally, I was not
You can just say you were a grump.
I was a grump. I was totally a grump. But like normally I'm not, and so I don't know what that is exactly. It sort of seems like I'm good up to about 5 or 6 hours. And so maybe it's a training thing and maybe it's a fueling thing, but I seem to like 6 hours is where like maybe I just need to like stuff my face at 5.5 hours and then see how I feel.
I feel like maybe your fueling
I think
wasn't
my fueling
optimal.
left something to be desired.
Yeah,
Do we think it's possible for Sid to buckle?
which means going under 12 hours.
Which means going 57 minutes faster than she did this year.
And a lot of people have expressed a lot of faith in me, which I appreciate. I think there's a few things to consider here. One, I had a very, very good day. I went into it highly trained. I've been doing this for a long time. I think a lot of people who are like, Sid, I'll get a buckle next year, no problem, are coming from a perspective of like, oh, I did Marji in 19 hours and then I cut off 2 hours, and that gets harder and harder as you go faster and faster. 57 minutes is, I think,
About 7%.
7%, which is, I mean, let me just put it that way. If I got 7% faster across the board, like I would be doing very well. Obviously that is the goal, to keep getting faster. There's not a ton of low-hanging fruit. If I were to race Marji again and try for the buckle, I mean, it would have to be, everything would have to be so dialed. I would have to eat more, as we discussed. Like, I think there's something left on the table there. Haha. Sorry, so bad. I think we could also dial the support crew more. My parents were awesome.
Amazing.
But we honestly, like, going into this, didn't really know how much support they were able to give. Just it was a little confusing. I think I would have to do full pack swaps instead of refilled bladders, especially with like our camera situation. Like I swapped the battery in my camera. I had 10 minutes of stop time, which honestly is more than it felt. It did not feel like 10 minutes, but according to Strava, my moving time was 12:47, right?
Instead of
And
57.
57. So there's 10 minutes of potential there, but that's not a lot. And I honestly think a lot of the people who cut hours and hours off their time, like a lot of that is cutting down stop time.
There's still some time to be made there.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 minutes. I
Yeah.
think it'd be hard to have less than 1 minute per aid station of stop time.
So that'd be 3 minutes.
Oh, that's true.
If I also want to eat more,
Yeah.
you know, you have to kind of take that into account. I think 5 minutes of stop time is probably as minimal as you can do without starting to lose time in other areas.
Yeah.
So it's down to what,
All right.
12:52. Knowing the course better would help, eliminating that kind of self-doubt about slowing down because I worried I missed a turn.
Doing it a second time, you have an idea of what the course looks like. So even if you didn't spend a lot of time like learning the course, I think a second time would help because overall you'd have an idea of what the course looks like. And even just the fact that we rode the last 20 miles, I think your last 20 miles, there was less hesitation, less question because you knew sort of vaguely what it looked like.
Right, and had sort of a big picture idea. You could try to cut weight off the bike. Again, that's a little hard to do without sacrificing comfort. Like I did run those heavier pedals and I think that kind of was worth it. I don't want to go much lighter on the tires, like maybe do an Aspen ST in the back.
There's potential ways to make the bike a little bit lighter. That's not gonna make a huge difference.
When we've talked about this, the kind of general conclusion, and I think Mike agrees with us, is that we could probably get 25 minutes faster on knowing the course, having like the world's most dialed support situation, and better fueling, lighter bike. So basically, like I would have to get
3.5% faster.
There you go, 3.5% faster. Anyway, I'm a big like never say never person. I just think it's worth being realistic. I think the thing that is keeping me from putting this as my goal for 2025, or really deciding that that's what I want to do, is the fact that everything could go perfect. I could get 3.5% faster, could just have the best day of my life, and it could rain, and I could run a 14-hour time. So I think that's sort of the trouble with like time goals in general, is it's very out of your hands. I mean, it always is with bike racing. There's always an element that's out of your hands, and it's sort of an exciting goal, and I like the idea of it, but I think it's not like, oh, I just need to know the course better, or oh, I just need to like not bonk because I didn't bonk.
No, there's lots of little things that would help. and it would still be hard. And the other part of it is that there's lots of really good races.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we don't want to go back and race Marji. It's just that there are so many good races and it's hard to choose.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely be back. The question is when. I feel like we rambled way too much. It's gonna be a nightmare to cut down.